Okay, so in this second part of the videos on stress, I want to think about what happens to parents when they're stressed and the different levels of stress that impact on parents. To recap, the last one we looked at babies and how when they are under a lot of stress and they're crying a lot, then this shuts down their ability to make those neural connections in their brain because they have lots of cortisol, which is the stress hormone, washing around their brain. That hormone affects the ability for those synapses to happen in the brain, and so long-term stress can really affect a baby and its cognitive development and its ability to regulate its emotions and self-soothe itself in the long term. Whereas if you give the baby lots of comfort, nurture and emotionally responsive parenting, then it has lots of oxytocin, and that chemical washes through the brain. That's a pleasure chemical, and the oxytocin actually fuels the myelination, the hardwiring of the brain. It fuels the synapses and it increases the ability of the brain to make those really critical connections that help a baby to develop its sense of itself, its world, the identity, them feeling safe. So in the long term, the more nurture, the more comfort, the more security that a baby receives, it will become more resilient and more able to self-soothe. So that puts a lot of pressure on us and it can be really, really hard. So in this video, you see I've got a cold, little baby Gabriel's asleep, I've got a wash on, so I thought I'd do a video on parent stress and how do we manage to be emotionally responsive to our children when we have a lot of baggage and a lot of stuff going on with us. So just to think about stress biologically very quickly, babies' stress is really purely biological. They are distressed because of hunger, because of feeling cold, because of feeling scared, because of feeling overstimulated. So it is all very automatic and biologically driven. For us, stress is a whole different ballgame. It's massively complicated. We do have, we have the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system, which work in dance together. The sympathetic nervous system boosts our energy, builds ourselves up ready for a fight or a flight response. So it's high energy and ready for intense physical activity. Your heart rate goes up, your muscles start twitching, you start breathing and panting and getting ready to do exercise. And then the parasympathetic nervous system, the hormones are released to calm you down, to get you ready for rest, and so your digestion process can happen. Gabriel's awake. I'll just get him. There we go. He's come to join us. So, those two systems work in kind of parallel in relation to each other to help us calm down and help us prepare for stress. And what happens is, some things are biologically driven still, so they are reflexive stress responses. For example, touching a hot plate or feeling the cold or having caffeine or other drugs, your body responds to that stress automatically and it kind of bypasses the brain. So there's no cognitive appraisal of the situation. There's automatic reflex of shivering or of moving your hand back or whatever the drug will induce, like caffeine, heart rate increasing. But for the majority of our life situations, what happens is that you have an event and then you have an electrical impulse going up to your brain from your neurons and the axons going up from that event to your brain. And within your brain, you make the decision as to whether that situation is stressful or not. So it is all in our perception. And there is a wonderful phrase, where did I get it? Yeah, a Greek philosopher said, "Men are disturbed not by things, but the views they take on these things." So it is not really our situations that cause our stress, it is really our perception. So our brain tells us that that is a stressful situation. And it may well be, and we may well need to have a stress response. But the problem with chronic stress, so a lot of the stressful situations that we have as parents do not require you to run or you to fight something or to run away. You might want to run away and you might want to fight your toddler, but they're not very helpful, and they shut down your ability to be emotionally responsive to that person when this stress is calling you to fight or to flight or to just shut down completely. It's an unhelpful response when you're trying to be emotionally responsive to your little ones. And I wanted to think about this in 3 different levels: the individual level, the family level, and our level as society and culture, because I think that there's a lot to consider at all of those stages, and different research as well. So on an individual level as a parent, we all have a different personality, we're all unique, and some people are just naturally more anxious. So there is a whole range of difference in how anxious people are. And it's good to kind of begin to be mindful of that as we become parents. Are you someone who gets angry? Are you someone who gets more anxious? And that will increase when you are a parent. So consider how you cope in those situations and what helps you, because you're going to need those. You're going to need those coping strategies. And sometimes, certainly for different situations and different people, and at different times of our lives, we might have more limited coping strategies and more limited resilience. So trait anxiety is a big thing where people have very considerable differences in their levels of trait anxiety, and it can impact on how emotionally responsive you can be if you're more predisposed to anxiety. Secondly, our family situation. I think it's also something when you become a parent that you realise that you are becoming your parents without realising it. Suddenly you say something and you're like, oh my gosh, that's my mum. And that could be a good thing, but it could also be a bad thing if we're not consciously aware of it. So as you go through stressful situations, we automatically go back to our childhood and how those situations were managed by our parents. So there is a kind of subconscious level that, because stress leads you to doing the fight flight, which is a primitive response, we do tend to go back into our mind of our automatic responses, which are very hardwired early on at this stage and when we were really young. So we kind of shut down our cognitive, rational brain and we tend to be a bit more automatic. So it's good to reflect on what your childhood was like, how your parents brought you up, how they managed their stress, what were the coping strategies that we had as a family. Were those helpful? Were they not? And so if you can think about that and consciously say, I'm not going to do it that way, I'm going to do it this way, then that can be really helpful, because before you know it, you're in a stressful situation and we have reverted back to being like our parents, because that is our strongest internal working model of managing stress, managing any difficult situation. It goes right back to that primitive automatic response from early childhood. So the family dynamic and our history of parenting will have a big impact on how we manage stress. And it's up to us really as parents on trying to be emotionally responsive to think about those. And that can be quite difficult because it might bring up painful memories and difficult memories of our childhood. But it can be really important for us to think about becoming our own parents and separating ourselves away from our parents. We don't have to do it the same as them. We are making our own pathway for our own children. And finally, I want to think about society. So we live in an individualistic, capitalistic society, and fundamentally that is very difficult for parenting. Families are often split apart and very separate, and the society kind of supports and praises success and comparison. So you compare and you want what someone else has, because that's a capitalistic society. oh, I don't have that, I want that. And if you do that with children, and if you do that with parenting, that puts immense pressure on you and unrealistic expectations, because it isn't like that. And I mean, like, I find it with you can't help it, but you think, oh, that baby's sleeping 5 hours in the night, that's amazing, he's only doing 2. And then you're looking at what you can buy and what you can do to make that better. So it puts pressure on you. Well, if I do this, maybe he'll sleep better. If I do this, maybe he'll sleep better. Or maybe he won't. And then you've got an unrealistic expectation, and you feel pressure as a parent and guilt if it doesn't work, that you're not doing the right thing for your child. Some children just don't sleep. And so we're in a society that can be unhelpful for parents, because it does put unrealistic expectations on us, and we do feel like we should be doing lots for our children and getting lots for them in order to promote their intelligence and make them more social and improve their talking and blah blah blah, because it's all out there for us. And the other thing is that it can be quite isolating. So again, because we prize success and we're quite individualistic, the idea of saying to someone, I am struggling, can you come over for a cup of tea, or please help me, is really, when do you ever say that to someone? We just don't. We don't ask for help. We're not a society that asks for help. And it's very difficult to be supported and to be vulnerable with people. So parenting and having your first child, you almost have to go against the grain of how society works in order to be in a community and surround yourself by people that will help you parent. Because at the end of the day, through evolution, these little ones did not grow up with one person around them. They grew up in a clan. They grew up in a group. And that's why we're the most intelligent and the most successful animals on the planet, because we knew how to socialise. And right from early on, we connected and we bonded and we worked as a group. Parenting is exactly the same, and if not more important. We cannot do this on our own, and we were never designed to do it on our own. And I think that the increase in mental health needs and the increase in isolation is just an example of how it's against how we were developed. It's against how we evolved. We are inherently social beings. These little ones are inherently social beings, and as parents, we need to go against the grain of society to say, help me and hold my baby so I can do a wash, or so I can sleep, and go over to people's houses and just ask people. So I think that's a really important thing, and that's something that I've been thinking about a lot, being a parent, that you have a lot of pressure to be a certain thing and to do certain things, but at the end of the day, it's good to just go, help, I don't think I'm doing it right, if there is even a right way, and to ask people for help. So that is my thoughts on stress in parenting, and I'll send some research links as well. Thanks for listening.